The next sound that we're going to approach is the choke. The way we approach chokes here is that it's a crash and then a mute. You can have long mutes, you can have short mutes, it all just depends on the rhythm. So the choke itself we define as at most a 16th note mute. So the way that we teach this is through an exercise where we slowly go through different mute rhythms. We're first going to do a half note mute, a quarter note mute, an eighth note mute, and then finally the choke itself, which is a 16th note mute. When we're approaching the mute, we don't want to change the prep at all. The prep between the crash, a crash mute, and a choke itself are all exactly the same. The only difference happens at the contact point, whether we then extend out for a full crash, we play a dead crash, which is where we just end back at flat, or whether we then come into the body for the mute. The pathway between the flat position, where we play the crash, and the mute, we want that to be as short as possible, so that way we eliminate any excess motion, and that way it can be lightning quick when we need it to be for the choke itself. When we come into the mute position, we want to make sure that the body is making as much contact with the cymbals as possible, so that way the sound gets cut off completely and quickly. That means that when we come in, we're going to be bringing the cymbals into the torso, and we're going to be getting as much of the torso, the upper, lower arms, and the hands all onto the cymbal. So at this position, we're going to be hugging the cymbals in, making sure that sound is completely cut off, and we're going to stay there until we come back out to the flat position to then go on to our next sound. I'm going to have Josh demonstrate a crash and then the mute. So first we're going to prep as if we're going to play any other crash. Once we've made contact, we're going to stop at that dead position, which means we're back at flat, and then from there we're going to bring the cymbals in to mute against the body. So first we're prepping. From here we bring the plates forward to make contact for the crash. And from here we then bring the cymbals into the body in as straight line of a path as possible, so that way it's efficient and it's quick. Let's do that again slowly. We prep, we play, and then we bring them in for the mute. We're going to be demonstrating our crash choke exercise, which breaks down the lengths of the mutes over different rhythms. We're first going to play a half note mute, a quarter note mute, an eighth note mute, and then finally the choke itself, which we estimate to be a 16th note mute. We're going to do this slowly so that way you can see each time that we're playing a good sounding crash at the flat position and that the mute itself is always as efficient as possible. Want to be bringing it into the body quickly so that way we get a nice short sound that is completely muffled. For that exercise, the focus here is that the mute is always going to be together and in rhythm. We're building up the muscle memory between the flat position and then the mute itself, so that way as we go through those quicker and quicker rhythms, we're working towards the choke, which is going to be as quick as possible. The more you do this exercise, the easier it'll be to get that choke sound, and eventually you can build up to just doing chokes on their own. To demonstrate the choke, we'll do a normal choke exercise. This is going to be 8 chokes every 8 counts. We're going to still prep on 8, we'll have the contact on 1 as always, and as soon as the contact has happened, we're going to come in as quick as possible to the mute position. The speed here is the key. The quicker it is, the better it's going to sound. So as you come in, we're trying to make sure that we're getting all of the sound off as soon as possible. Here, we're going to come for the choke on 1, and we'll always be coming out back to the flat position on count 3. This is a standard amount of time for us that we use both in exercises and music. Choke on 1 count, come out 2 counts later. Notice for the choke exercise that we're still prepping just as we would for any sort of flat crash exercise, in that the sound is going to be as short as possible. We want the cutoff to be complete and very, very quick. This exercise will get easier and easier the more you practice the mutes at a slower rhythm. That same mute exercise that we just saw earlier will build up the muscle memory that will allow us to move quickly and have that sort of choke sound that we desire.